All right, so we are live on Facebook. Assalamu alaikum, hello everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to this amazing workshop titled "The Future of Digital Utilities in Pakistan: the role of digital innovation and partnerships." My name is Zunaira Ali, and I'm the assistant manager for marketing at the National Incubation Center here in Islamabad. And it's an honor to partner with Gsma to deliver this workshop talking about digital utilities, including water sanitation, clean cooking, and sustainability. Just to give you an overview of today's session, we'll start with an introduction by our program manager, Zishan Shahid. Zishan has joined us live in today's session. Zishan, welcome on board and thank you for coming live with us. Zishan will give an introduction of what NIC does and to formally welcome our panelists and the keynote speaker. Over to you, Zishan.
Thank you, Zunaira. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining today's session. For those, to the panelists, speakers, and to the audience as well. I hope you're all doing very well. Just to start with, allow me to give you a very brief introduction of the Nash Incubation Center. The Nash Incubation Center is the Pakistan's premier incubation center. It was established in 2016. It's a public-private partnership between Ministry of IT and Telecom through its fund called Ignite and Jazz, which is a leading telecom company of Pakistan, and then Team Up, which is co-managing this particular project. Our mission or our objective is to make a conducive or help make a conducive ecosystem, startup ecosystem in Pakistan. And that's what we've been trying to do since past 5 years. Over the years, we've incubated about 290 plus startups. These startups, they've gone on to create more than 15,000 jobs, and they've gone on to raise an investment and revenue figure of about $30 million in this particular time. One of the focus, one thing that we focus on is the leveraging innovation to solve the industrial and social problems. And today's event is actually part of that, and we're glad to be partnering with GSMA on that. It's globally, utilities. It's a huge challenge. The conventional big pipes approach to water provision and sanitation has changed little in last century or maybe a century and a half. It still relies on centralized, energy-intensive infrastructure to provide, capture, treat, and dispose of water and human waste. But this is, of course, failing to meet challenges posed by this rapid urbanization, limited water resources, and, of course, climate change in urban or informal settlements and in low middle income countries as well. So we believe that the way forward is that we leverage innovation, digitization, and especially mobile to solve these challenges. So today's session is about that as well. We're going to discuss, we have people from public sector, private sector, innovators who are working to enable access to affordable, reliable, and safe and sustainable utility services in Pakistan and for other low-income populations as well. So these are the areas that we're going to discuss today, and I would like to thank GSMA for partnering with us, all the speakers, panelists who've joined us today, the audience who've taken time out to be part of this session. And with that, I would like to now invite Mr. Imran Ghazali for his keynote. Imran Ghazali is General Manager of Digital Media Wing, Pakistan, with the government of Pakistan. He's a digital media expert with extensive experience in strategy and training. Imran formerly led Prime Minister Imran Khan's initiative of Clean and Green Pakistan. So over to you, Imran.
Thank you, Zishan. I would like to thank NIC and GMSA for having me here today. And it's really delighted to be among the inspirational digital community of Pakistan and the people whom I also admire and follow in all this journey that we've been going through for the digital transformation. So I will, talk about some of the initiatives that the government has taken on in terms of the digital transformation and the way the ecosystem is moving forward in Pakistan. I'm really glad to be here, part of this NIC forum. This is, when the journey started for Islamabad in 2016. I was also there at the first launching event when all of this was formed, and a lot of these things were, still a journey ahead, or like a dream that, these things will happen. And I think in the last 5 years, I've seen the kind of work that is being done, from NIC platform and the startups who have emerged from NIC in Islamabad and, across Pakistan. So that's one of the most exciting things that we see in Pakistan, the kind of innovation that is happening, the involvement of the young people in Pakistan. If we talk about the landscape in Pakistan, currently we know there are 110 million people who have access to 3G, 4G or broadband internet, and which is like, 4 times the total population of Canada. So this is a huge number, and if we look at it in terms of opportunity, in terms of access people have. Similarly, there are 190 million people now who have access to mobile phones across Pakistan. So that's a key number and huge number. When we talk about the use of digital in improving the efficiency and providing the utilities and services to the people of Pakistan, and the challenges that we face in Pakistan, to provide solutions to them using of technology and digital, I see a lot of bright future and a lot of innovative solutions coming in. Almost every day we hear about these in the news, the startups doing great things. In terms of the government, some of the key things that I'll mention, I'll start off with the Prime Minister's initiative of Clean Green Pakistan. So basically, this is a campaign which includes, tree plantation is one aspect of it, and then cleanliness is another aspect. Water is another aspect. Clean drinking water for access to clean drinking water for people, and hygiene is another important element of this Clean Green Pakistan initiative or campaign. And if we look at it, when I started working in this campaign, that is for the first time when I learned that a lot of stunting that we have in Pakistan, among the young babies, especially 1 to 5 months. It's the stunting happens due to sometimes malnutrition. But another thing that I learned during this Clean Green in Pakistan was the major cause of this is the hygiene related issues, not having access to clean drinking water or general hygiene that most of the in many areas that is still not there up to the mark. People don't have access to toilets and stuff like that. So these were the key challenges or problems that the government faces in this area. And being the digital strategy manager for this campaign, what we did was that basically use the digital media, social media platforms, number one, to create awareness. Because as I said, I also learned about this while I started working in this campaign. So it was very important to educate the general public about it, how important are these issues, why the hygiene is important, and how you can take care of it, how you can address these issues. And then, so there were 2 aspects of this campaign. One of them is, of course, to improve the government's efficiency in order to resolve these challenges or problems. But the other aspect was also, so cleanliness, keeping our cities clean is not only possible if the government will, work on it. It is something that basically is possible when the citizens, they also contribute, they also play their role. So the awareness part was also equally important for all these campaigns. And then, and similarly in the 10 billion tree tsunami project, again, the government has been planting trees across Pakistan, but, it's only possible when the general public is also mobilized, the citizens are also mobilized across for this. So there was an important aspect in which the digital technology, or let's say the app, there was an app that was created that was used, number one, to register the Clean Green Pakistan champions. So that was, students across Pakistan, universities, schools, any citizen could go on the app or the portal, and they could register themselves as a Clean Green Pakistan champion. And all the activities that I mentioned were, which were part of the Clean Green Pakistan campaign, they were being evaluated on the basis of the work or volunteer work that they were doing, and then they were getting certain number of points, and in which, with certain criteria, champions were being declared. So in one aspect, people were being, again, number one, through awareness, becoming part of the campaign, and then, they were being evaluated. So there was more kind of, motivation for them to contribute. And the second aspect of this, which was again more important for the government or the government leadership, was to also evaluate and monitor the performance of, let's say, all the districts, what they are doing in their areas. In Islamabad, if they're in a certain areas, there's, cleanliness issues or some hygiene issues. So those officials who are working in that particular area could also be held accountable, number one. And at the same time, the people who were delivering for those tasks, are incentivized, are given benefits for, for delivering those tasks efficiently. So again, all the districts, this was, piloted in the beginning phase in Punjab and some districts in KP, and then, spread across, I think, other provinces also. So again, through that dashboard, all the activities that were being done on ground, they could be evaluated and they, could be scored. So, through this example, we can see that the government is also relying or using the digital technology, the mobile apps, people's access to internet, and then through that they were, bringing more efficiency into an initiative or a program which is going to benefit and resolve a lot of problems. As I said in the beginning, the hygiene issue that we face, which causes stunting in the children. So that was one of the very good example, and that campaign is still going on across Pakistan. I have moved to a different role, but again, digital was one of the core parts, a part of that overall initiative. Similarly, moving on, if I quickly have to give that example of the Pakistan's federal cabinet has recently been made paperless, or to say all the ministers, including the prime minister, all of them now carry a tab to the meetings. So number one, of course, the good thing is that the paper are not being used. So, of course, it's climate friendly and ecosystem friendly. But the other thing is that it's also improving the efficiency, because we all, most of the people who have worked with the government or are involved, they know, the traditional file system, it makes things slower. There are a lot of issues due to that. So with this system, all of the, since there was no paperwork, all the agenda points of the federal cabinet meetings were put on the tabs. The statuses are being updated as in on how it happens. And then at the same time, any ministry or minister or secretary, whichever task that they get, they have to, kind of give the input within that e-office system. And so it makes the whole system more efficient. It makes it all, the time efficiency also improves in all of this. And I would say, it also increases the transparency and the accountability within a working structure. So that's, again, a very encouraging step that has happened. And a lot of ministries, as I know, within the government have been transformed on e-filing system. There's still a long way to go with that. And I know working in the government, sometimes there's resistance to change. Sometimes these things are new, for the people who are working there, kind of, lacking in these skills. So there are, of course, challenges, and, sometimes these things are a bit slow, but it is happening, across all different ministries to improve the efficiency. Then, talking about the collaborations and using the digital technology, I'll also just quickly shed some light on the, when the pandemic hit the globe and Pakistan, we, we saw NCOC, the National COVID Control Command Center was, initiated. And then through NCOC, we learned that, there was a lot of reliability on the digital technology. People initially, in the initial phases, we saw the smart lockdowns were implemented across Pakistan. And then, basically the COVID cases were being tracked through, and then, the testing services. And that, helped us, I think, tackle the COVID situation in a better way. And then, when we moved on to the vaccination phase, when we talk about collaborations, we collaborated with Google on this. We collaborated with Facebook for mass awareness campaigns. Everyone in Pakistan, had to kind of register online. That's how, all of us all got registered and got our certifications also. So again, in this phase also, we saw a huge reliability of the government on the digital technology. And then, at the end, making things more efficient, more accountable, more transparent, and the whole process was, made better by the use of digital technology. And I remember, Ministry of Health and us, we worked together with Google. Google Maps was used to track different, areas and people, and then that's how the messages were also being disseminated. So again, a lot of reliability on digital technology and innovation to address these challenges. Moving on, we also saw, similarly, again, when the COVID started, in the first 2-3 waves, the schools were closed down. Suddenly, people and the schools, the public schools, everyone had to switch to e-learning. That was something, which might have taken a lot of time, but, due to the COVID challenge that we have, there was very far, quickly we basically moved to digital transformation. Just, wrapping up this quickly, I also want to mention the performance agreements that the Prime Minister Office has done with all the ministries. Being part of Ministry of Information, I'm also part of that process. So I know all of that is also being monitored, tracked. All of that is being done using e-office. So again, it improves the efficiency of the overall government performance that is happening. People are made more accountable. Then for the awareness campaign, the government has collaborated with the platforms in which there's a lot of young audience working, like TikTok, Snack videos, Facebook, Instagram. We've been actively collaborating with them to disseminate the message and get it across to people. And then just about the digital media wing, basically, we manage the digital communications of the government of Pakistan, or the state of Pakistan. And before this digital media wing, there was no organized digital media presence of the government of Pakistan or the state of Pakistan. So, now we have, in the last 1.5 years, organized that, strategically organized all these social media assets of the government of Pakistan, and also increased the digital media presence of Pakistani missions across the globe, which again is helping the citizens with their day-to-day problems that they face. So all in all, using the technology, the government has improved the performance, and it, helps. So innovation, collaborations, it's very important in this day and age. Last but not the least, again, I would like to thank and congratulate the NIC, and across Pakistan, the NICs that are working, and the partners which are working to make our digital transformation journey more efficient. And then, like the kind of investment Pakistan got in the startup sector in the last 1 year, there were $350 million that were raised, which was much more as compared to previous 5 years. So I see a lot of bright future in this area, and with the collaborations of everyone, all the stakeholders who are involved, I see Pakistan, becoming really strong in the overall digital sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Imran. Thank you for this wonderful keynote, and what a way to start. As you shared your experience at the Clean Green and working with the government, it's very hopeful to see that the government is moving towards digitizing all their departments. And as we go forward with this session today, we'll explore how we can extend that to utilities. Next up, I would like to introduce George Kibala. George is a part of the GSMA team. George will give an overview of the programs and what the GSMA is doing. As I mentioned earlier, this is a partnership between the Nash Incubation Center and GSMA to bring this workshop to you. Over to you, George.
Thank you, Zanera, and thanks for the National Incubation Center as well, again, for partnering to host this interesting session. I'm just briefly going to share my screen, so bear with me. You should be able to see it at this stage.
Yes, I see your screen.
Great. So thanks again all for attending this workshop on the future of urban utility services in Pakistan, with a particular focus on the role of digital innovation and partnerships. I'm briefly going to present our program, the GSMA Digital Utilities Program, and then outline some partnership opportunities that there are for startups, government organizations, and enabling organizations that want to work on improving inclusive urban utility service delivery in Pakistan. As Zanera mentioned, my name is George Kibala Bauer, and I'm currently a director in the GSMA Digital Utilities team, managing our strategic partnerships with partner organizations. So the GSMA, as you may know, represents mobile operators worldwide, but within the GSMA, we have a mobile for development team which drives innovation in digital technology to reduce inequalities in our world. So we have teams working on topics such as digital inclusion, bridging the digital divide between rural and urban, rich and poor, women and men. We have teams working on the role of digital innovation in humanitarian settings, digital payments, climate tech. And I work for our digital utilities team, and our program's mission is really to support urban resilience in low and middle income countries by enabling access to essential utility services through digital solutions and innovative partnerships. And we define utility services as energy, water, sanitation, waste management, and transport. And we really think that access to these services is key for cities to be resilient to future challenges, such as population growth, climate change, and inequality. And I'll talk a bit more about why this is also relevant in the context of Pakistan. Our program is funded by the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, and also supported by the GSMA and its members. So in order to achieve our program objectives, we engage in various activities. I'm just going to outline some of them. So we de-risk and catalyze innovative urban utility services. We engage in research and insights on the developmental and commercial impact of these services. We engage in partnership facilitation and convene key ecosystem stakeholders. And then we provide technical advice to mobile operators, municipalities, and utility service providers on the role of digital innovation and improved utility service provision, but also specifically on some of the digital innovations that we work on, such as digital payments or IoT, for example. The reason why we focus on urban utility services is because we really think that the lack of affordable, reliable, and safe utility services is very costly, particularly for low-income populations in urban areas, as they often have to spend more money and time to access these services. But it's not only costly for individuals, it's also costly for society, as it makes cities less resilient to challenges such as climate change. It decreases productivity and social mobility, and it prevents the transition towards a low carbon urban future. So if cities are really to become engines of productivity, inclusive utility services are quite critical. And while there has been an historic rise in mobile connectivity in low and middle income countries, billions of people continue to lack access to essential utility services. And with rapidly expanding informal settlements across Africa and Asia, where 90% of urban population growth from now until 2050 will be concentrated, water shortages, unsanitary conditions, unreliable power provision, pollution, and inadequate waste management could remain a defining reality for many. So our program really works to confront this challenge. We have an innovation fund that works on this catalyzing and de-risking of innovative urban innovations that I talked about earlier. And we have 10 years of experience in supporting innovators in the utilities space and investing in startups in low and middle income countries through our GSMA Innovation Fund team. That GSMA Innovation Fund provides grant funding, it facilitates partnerships with mobile operators, it mentors startups on the use of mobile technology. It helps them also with monitoring and evaluation to really understand the impact that startups might have on the Sustainable Development Goal agenda. And we also give startups the opportunity to participate in big industry events like MWC Barcelona. I'm not sure if you've seen 2 weeks ago, a Pakistani assistive tech startup, DevTalk, was featured at MWC Barcelona. And it was really impressive to see the innovation showcased at such a large stage. More specifically, recently we've launched a round of the GSMA Innovation Fund, which was focused on digital urban services. And here we're looking forward to announcing the grantees we're supporting soon. But the topic areas that this fund focuses on is specifically urban utility service provision, so water, energy, sanitation, and plastics and waste management. And if you want to learn more about our funding activities in the space and potential future funding opportunities going forward, please get in touch with our team. Just a bit about our program impact. So we've allocated 9.4 million pounds in grant funding to 53 projects between 2013 and 2020. And those projects have reached 6.5 million beneficiaries over the course of the projects. And what's quite important for our program as well is to understand to what extent our grant funding has been able to crowd in additional investment. And we're proud to say that, you know, the projects we invested in following our grant have been able to attract 309 million pounds in additional funding. We've also facilitated 48 partnerships between mobile operators and startups across these various projects. Just if you're interested in some of our work in Pakistan, we've worked with JAS, CISNR, and PESCO in Peshawar on a solution that wanted to confront the challenge of electricity theft and line losses through smart metering. So if you're interested in that, you're very welcome to check out our video on the project on YouTube. It's a really interesting example of public-private collaboration in the utility space, this time in the energy sector. And we've also done some work in the renewable energy space in Pakistan previously as a team. Just really quickly to underline why this topic of urban utility service provision is critical in the context of Pakistan. Pakistan is already the most urbanized country in South Asia, and by 2025, the UN estimates that half of its inhabitants will be living in cities. So on the one hand, that's a huge opportunity because urbanization is generally associated with boosting productivity, economic growth, and the opportunity for new innovative ideas to emerge. But on the other hand, it also poses a huge pressure on already stressed municipal financial resources, and will test the country's ability to provide basic services at scale to these rapidly expanding informal settlements, such as, for instance, the case of Orangi town in Karachi that you all well know. So some of the challenges that we already see is that 60% of urban residents in Pakistan lack access to safely managed water, 18% lack access to at least basic sanitation services, and nearly half of the population lack access to clean cooking. And beyond that, there's also a substantial and growing investment gap in urban infrastructure and service provision. And that's what we're going to discuss later on in the panel. So while there's been record years for Pakistani startups over the last few years, how can we make sure that some of this investment also goes to support essential service provision? And obviously climate change is accentuating some of these challenges, with Pakistan being one of the countries that's highest ranked on the Global Risk Climate Index. Digital solutions from our perspective are uniquely positioned to help address some of the challenges that I've just outlined with regards to essential urban service provision. And we can see here how some of the solutions that our program has supported, from pay-as-you-go, which allows customers to incrementally access services, to GIS solutions, which allow service providers to track logistics of their distribution channels, to smart monitoring and smart metering, to big data. All of these digital solutions are uniquely positioned to address some of the challenges that municipalities and utility service providers face when it comes to providing safe, sustainable, and reliable utility services to low-income populations. And as you can see in this graph, there's been a significant rise in mobile connectivity in Pakistan over the last decade. You can see that the percentage of smartphone connections has exploded, which means that now the array of digital solutions that are possible to be implemented is obviously greater, because now more people can access apps, more people can access mobile internet, but also mobile in general. And obviously in urban areas, the market penetration for mobile services is even greater than in rural areas. So we really want to drive partnerships between the public sector, mobile operators, and startups. And we really think that each of those stakeholders brings something unique to the table. Innovators bring new approaches and solutions. Mobile operators provide the digital platforms and underlying connectivity infrastructure to reach and communicate with customers, while municipalities and utilities have crucial services and mandates to crucial service mandates to fulfill. In practice, however, we see that there's a lot of enormous potential in collaboration that isn't tapped into. So in this workshop, we really want to see what are some of the challenges to public-private collaboration, and how can we overcome some of the challenges. I'm going to skip these slides quickly, but basically just want to underline that there are a lot of synergies between mobile operators and startups that make partnerships between mobile operators and startups a win-win proposition. And we've shown that in some of our research pieces that I invite you to read. Maybe one of my colleagues can paste one of our reports on supporting urban innovation that goes into this chart in more detail in the chat. But basically the point is that there are important synergies between both stakeholders. And just to end, in terms of what's next, after this workshop, we'd like to send you a participant survey and understand what your learnings were from the workshop. We'll also be following up with a blog summarizing key insights. We'll also be providing partnership support and technical assistance for startups in Pakistan that want to partner with mobile operators or government institutions. My colleague Aham is also ready to tell you more about our collaboration in the GSMA Smart Village project in collaboration with the Universal Service Fund, where we basically pilot different innovative solutions in collaboration with governments, stakeholders, but also mobile operators, and other follow-up engagements that there might be from the workshop. So just leaving you here, here's some contact information. The slides will be shared with NIC as well. And please get in touch with my colleague Aham, who's based in Islamabad, and our senior market engagement manager in the country, if you want to learn more about our work in Pakistan and the broader region, because we at the GSMA, we're really excited about some of the opportunities in Pakistan specifically, and some of the momentum we're able to build upon, and the great government commitment we see towards improving urban utility service provision as well. Thanks all, and looking forward to the rest of the session.
Thank you so much, George. Ladies and gentlemen, that was George giving us an overview of what GSMA does. And I'll just take a pointer from what you mentioned. Public-private partnerships are indeed the way to go forward. And as you mentioned, DevTalk, I'm happy to share that DevTalk is one of the National Incubation Center's alumni, and we were very proud of them for providing the interpretation services in the event recently in Barcelona. So moving on, now we move forward with our first panel on water and sanitation, using mobile to promote sanitation and clean water management practices. For this panel, I'm joined by our moderator, Hira Vajahat, who's the Climate Launchpad lead. With Hira joining us as panelists, we have Shayan Suhail-Server, who's CTO of Every Water, Manager of WaterAid, Aisha Sarwari, who's Head of Sustainability in Coca-Cola, and of course, Madam Tahira. In this panel, we'll talk about how sanitation and water resources can be managed through the digitization. So over to you, Hira.
Thank you so much, Zunaira. It's a pleasure to be here today. And Assalamu alaikum to everyone, and thank you for joining in. Today's discussion, which will be focusing on using mobile to promote sanitation and clean water management practices, and in which, as Zunaira mentioned, we want to talk about some of the challenges that exist in the sanitation and clean water space and how we can specifically use mobile technology to bridge these challenges. So we head into our panel discussion. Just a quick introduction to the panelists. Ms. Taira Azam, who is a sanitation activist and the CEO of Son Valley Development Program, and she has over 25 years of experience working closely with low-income communities and strengthening self-help capacities of these communities, working with different stakeholders like the NGOs, INGOs, governments. Mr. Munawar Hussain, who works at WaterAid Pakistan and has more than 25 years of experience in the development sector, mainly WASH. And he's designed and implemented a number of development projects in all the provinces of Pakistan and abroad. Aisha Sarwari leads the public affairs and communications and sustainability function at Coca-Cola Export Corporation, Pakistan and Afghanistan, with over 18 years of experience in comms, PR, sustainability across various industries. And then, of course, Shayan Suhail-Server, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Every Water, a company that is revolutionizing clean water in Pakistan and across the globe. And amongst many accolades, Shayan has recently been included in the Forbes 30 under 30 list. So there was a very quick and very fast introduction in the interest of time, but I do hope I've been able to sum up the key highlights. And I'd like to jump straight into the discussion by a question to all our panelists. If you could take 2 minutes each to share with us what you think is the single biggest problem that people face in the water and sanitation space in Pakistan that technology can overcome. So maybe we can begin with Ma'am Tahira.
Thank you, Hira, for giving me the opportunity. So first of all, as with my experience and what I used to observe, that we don't have overall in our society, we don't have the realization of importance of water and saving of water. So if we look, because today's panel is more about the urbanization and urban setup. So if we look at the urban utilities provision, especially the water, we can see a huge loss of water everywhere. Now the government is establishing number of water filtration plants in each and every city. So for those plants maintenance and take care, they have to depute a one human resource at least to look after those plants. Why don't those plants can be handled by an app so that the government officials can see which plant have any issue and it can be solved easily. It happens in the last few years that whenever there is some plant have an issue or it's not working properly, the community have to complain. The people have to complain to the relevant authority that this plant have some issue. its water is not good. So why don't those plants can be operated through an app, and it can be done more smartly and effectively. At the same point, there is no monitoring or sort of responsibility from the community itself. Government set up some facilities for the community or the people to facilitate them, and then people think it's the sole responsibility of the government. So if where the government is setting up those mineral water filtration plants, so if they also engage the local community people over there, and they also have some access of through some app in their mobile phones and their smartphones, and they can also monitor the functioning of those filtration plants, and they can highlight whenever there is some problem. So this is one of a quick solution. And at the same point, when the other guests, they started, and they have really highlighted very important points in their discussion. The other issue, a big issue we are now seeing in our cities, especially the big cities, and even in the smaller cities, because we, from last 3 decades, we have a huge migration towards urban areas. So the unplanned urban areas with no civic services or with very little services. So how those services can be provided more efficiently and more smartly when we have so many users on phone and smartphones. Actually, we have to look into all these stakeholders. I would not say that only government is responsible in that. We all are responsible. So why not, where we are living, we can have a kind of a citizen app like the app PM portal is using. The residents of that area can have the access of that app that is monitoring all the utility services, and they can also monitor, so that they can highlight that this service is not working properly and this service needs to be improved. So if we digitize all these services, for example, our electricity department, they are using the digital meters. But again, their one human resource has to check and take a picture of those digital meters every month before generating the bill. Why it is happening? So when you are using the digital meters, it should be linked with some app, and the billing should be done automatically through that device. So somehow there is also still we have that hesitation at different level, even at government level. Yes, there is a political will, but not that so strengthened, I would say. And at the same time, when government designs something, they design only for themselves, not engaging the concerned community. So that's my point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am Taira. If I could hand the same question over to Munawar Saab, the single biggest problem that people face, and how can we use technology to overcome it?
Thank you very much. Very important and very relevant discussion is going on. What I have observed through my experience of working with different utilities for water and sanitation services, I believe the major and the bigger issue is actually governance issue. And that includes both like unnecessary political interference in these institutions. And number 2 is non-merit-based appointments in the past. These both coupled, and then when it comes to delivery, obviously there's a lack of capacity of proper planning. We overly depending now on foreign funding or management by the consultants of different projects instead of our own in-house capacity. So most of the utilities, they are having a good number of employees, yet they hire skills from the market. So that's the one bigger issue with our utilities in Pakistan. Another thing is like government is a little bit avoiding the transparency and accountability mechanisms being put in place. That's also linked to the governance issue as well. But to be frank, I would say that whenever we talk about digitization or digitalization of the system, everyone knows that will bring more accountability and transparency in the system. And that is something people sometimes government we have seen reluctant in adopting that. Another thing I would say is free services, because Pakistan water and sanitation has been taken really for granted, and the service charges that we receive from the consumers are really meager compared to the system that we manage. Our utilities in the bigger cities, they manage huge network of water and sanitation services, whereby the income that they have from the residential and commercial entities is quite insufficient, and therefore they really depend on the budgets from the government. And when the government budgets are also not allocated on time, there are issues you might have noticed in many bigger cities or even the small towns. The employees of the utilities go on strikes, and that's very common, and that is one of the reasons that we face issues of garbage in most of the cities. We face issues during the rain time, disruption of the sewerage system. We face issues of quality of water, access of water, and then tankering system and all those things. So I think these issues which currently the utilities are facing can be avoided through different measures. One is obviously looking at the governance system, but the additional tools could be like digitization of the system. So if we our intentions are right and we want to make the system work, then obviously we have to think about the smart solutions. And that includes introducing the digitalization of the system. And that includes, like, every utility should have their websites. They should come up with their applications. They should come up with the outreach to their clients. And they also be open to listen to the complaints. Once this is in place, I think people would be agreeing to pay for the services as well. Currently, willingness to pay is really low. In Pakistan, when we ask people that why don't you pay for water, what we hear is like, this is a gift from the God, so why should we pay? Water is for everyone, so therefore we cannot pay. But they are unable to understand that if we are paying for the electricity, for the gas, and for the telephone and everything else, we have to pay for water and sanitation services as well. So I think these are the bigger issues that I would say in my mind, and helping them sorting out requires a lot of political will. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Munawwar Saab. I could pass on the same question to Aisha.
Thank you so much. I think when we speak about challenges, the first few things that come to mind are the dearth of a policy framework that is consistently applied. We recently did an environment scoping study on the Indus Thelayari River. We found out that there's been waste accumulating there for over 25 years because several departments, have a challenge about whose responsibility it is to clean that waste. 25 years is a very long time. It really destroys upstream, downstream. It destroys everything in terms of people, planet. So we're looking at a policy framework that exists, but it exists in the file of a government department. And in terms of its implementation, there's maybe not political will so much of a challenge, because I do want to give credit where credit's due. Imran Khan's administration has been superbly committed to the Clean Green Pakistan initiative. And whenever we have to pitch as Coca-Cola to our global partners for us to bring more sustainability programs here, we say, look, this is a government that really believes in its mandate of improving the climate. And I'm actually speaking here on the sidelines of the climate conference in Karachi, where a lot of public sector, private sector companies have come together to build a coalition and to improve the COP26 sort of like commitments that Pakistan has made. Having said that, the second challenge, I think, in terms of inconsistent policy and challenges with the application of that policy is the, I think, research framework. Gsma is perhaps one of the very few organizations that goes into a deep dive to tell us where the inequities are, how women are actually not even part of the conversation, How about 100 million Pakistanis are using phones that are not even internet enabled? So they really provide us that conversation, but we now need to take that same level of granularity into the climate technology aspect as well. And really the whole job of policy frameworks is what? To incentivize good behavior from the private sector and from individuals. But by and large, behavior is not going to change if it's not easy to change. So that entire intervention has to be holistic. It has to apply in an integrated way at several points in the chain. And I would actually, really say there's nothing to celebrate here. If we look at our infrastructural component of the Digital Pakistan Dream, we are quite behind. So I think that the good stuff is very important. Yes, we have a very committed government up top that really believes in that and by and large understands the technicalities that are required to do that. There is also NIC, which is a personal favorite for me. Whenever there is a project that I think about, for example, that needs to be done, NIC is the place to go. It is really the place where innovation happens. And I think when we're talking about tech, we really should not forget that tech does not necessarily mean the technology or the coding aspect of it. Technology also brings with us its design thinking. It's sort of like design framework. And I would say that the solution to all of these sort of challenges I've put on there is agility. Be agile, really take your solutions to the ground and just do them and learn as you go. So an example of that is, you must have heard Coca-Cola's Pakistan's first plastic road initiative that we did with the NIC. And we did just that. We didn't know that much research about it. We just wanted to build a plastic road to demonstrate that PET bottles can en masse, 10 tons of plastic PET was used in a 1 kilometer road. But when we got into the project nitty-gritties, we realized how challenging it is, where the roadblocks are, where the incentives are. CDA was our partner for that. And really the game changing not necessarily comes from public-private partnerships, but it comes from doing these small and large projects to provide scale and doing them with your heart in the right place. If I can bring a little more poetry into our discussion here, I would say that really, if you care about ridding the world of plastic, then it really, what matters is that you have to be committed towards it and you have to make uncomfortable decisions as well.
Thank you so much, Aisha. And Shayan, last but not least, your thoughts on this? Shayan, I think you're on mute. So, all right, I guess we'll probably come back to Shayan. Might be having a little bit of a problem, but Munawar Saab, if I could ask you about any technology interventions that WaterAid has made in projects in Pakistan, specifically within the wash space.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. I think we can do a lot with the technology. And before I talk about Pakistan, in my experience of other countries, we have developed a complete system of monitoring, which is an online monitoring. And people use mobile phones applications and feeding into the data, and the real-time data comes to the utilities, and they could see that what is the situation of services in different parts of the country. So one big system that we have demonstrated in different countries. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, being an INGO, we are not allowed to use GPS systems, so therefore we normally don't demonstrate it here. But the other applications and technology options that we have modeled here, one is with the Capital Development Authority, CDA, and we have installed a SCADA telemetry system on the water filtration plants, which we have installed in different locations. This is kind of a pilot project, since this SCADA telemetry system was used by Wasa Lahore, and we learned from them, and we thought it will be really pertinent that CDA also shifts in their systems and then come to the digital know-how about system functionality through digitalization. So we, with the partnership of CDA, we modeled this. And I think this is the first intervention that we have done in Islamabad. First time then this color telemetry system has been installed. So PDA is very happy about that. And in a very informal discussion with the top officials, we heard that CDA is now planning to install telemetry system on most of their water filtration plants in Islamabad, because that tells you how much water you are withdrawing from the system, and how the water table is working, how the quality of water has been supplied to the clients. So all these things are on the screen real time. Another technical aspect that we did in our work is about groundwater recharge. We have demonstrated a groundwater recharge system in Islamabad, I8 sector in Kachnar Park, where we are installing the data loggers, because when we have developed the injection wells for groundwater recharge, we also want to know how much quantity of water we are contributing to the aquifers. And for that, we have installed the piezometers and data loggers. I think this going forward, because the system will be functional in a few weeks' time, we'll be able to have some research and see that how much water in what time we were able to contribute to the aquifers. And this is growingly important, because in this region, people and overall societies that newly growing are overly dependent on the groundwater, and lots of extraction we are doing, but very few groundwater recharge systems are installed in Pakistan. So I think these are some of the examples that we are doing. I think through them, we will be able to demonstrate to the utilities that how we can conserve our resources and how we can improve the efficiency of our system. Thank you.
Munawar Saab, just if you could just elaborate, are any of these systems dependent on mobile technologies at the moment? And if not, where do you think we can engage or actually include mobile technologies to support these systems?
Thank you very much. SCADA telemetry system has a mobile application, and that is connected, and we are now going to provide access to the communities. Currently, it was only with the CDA, but since we are now handing over our water filtration plants to communities, and this will be yet another model where, for the sustainability of the water filtration system, as Madam Tahira also said, that community participation is not included, and therefore there is lots of failure we are facing about water filtration systems. So we are introducing community or supervision for all these systems. And in Humak area of Islamabad, we have created different models of operation and maintenance of these water filtration systems. So with the mobile application, these communities will be having a direct supervision of the efficiency and operationalization of their water filtration plants. For data loggers, this will also be through mobile application. So we will be, because the sensors are installed on the site, and we will be having real-time data that how after every spell of rain, how water has been contributed, and if there are any issues with the system, we'll be able to knowing about them. So we'll be using mobile technology in this as well. But going forward, there's a huge potential in this area. As I said, from my experience of other countries, we can erect a complete system at the national level to look at the efficiency of water and sanitation services, which is provided by different utilities. Thank you very much.
Madam Tahira, if I could come over to you, and maybe if you can share in terms of your work and experience, how mobile and technology can be used to collect data, to manage resources for community engagement. Any examples that you might have?
Hira, practically, I would say that right now, I don't have any example related to utilities, but from other projects where we have done some other interventions, we built a dashboard for all the stakeholders, and as well as we have given the access to the community so that they can comment over there. They can share their feedback, even raise their queries and questions and the complaints as well. So as Munawar Saab has shared, and he has, mashallah, such a vast experience, there is still, you know, a kind of hesitation from the government to adapt or to go for such kind of solutions. Of course, there are some political reasons behind that, because all those solutions may have an impact on the human resource who is engaged, and to use that human resource in somewhere else, or their services, how a government is going to handle that. So there are number of, I would say that if I would be in a government office or office bearer, of course, I will also be look into that. So these are a number of challenges for the government. But of course, until unless we will not have the government willingness or political will to go for that, as they have done for the clean and green Pakistan, that is a good example of the government will. And same that the PM portal for the community complaints or anybody's complaint. So if such kinds of initiatives government willingly take, also for the utilities and also for the water sanitation sector, and as Munawar Saab already shared in while he was talking, and also Aisha, yes, the governance, accountability, participation, because all the stakeholders, until unless we all will not, like we, all civil society, community, government, institutions, we will not sit on the same table and we will not look into the solutions. We are such a blessed nation. We have so much people who are using the phone, and now we have such a cheap smartphone. It's just that how we are going to use that huge opportunity. It can be used also to sensitize our people. Don't wash your garages on daily basis. Don't wash your cars with the switched on motor. And this is how it's going. Even in Islamabad, we are living in Islamabad, fortunately, and we all know that how it happens in summer, especially the water shortage, and because the groundwater is abusively used by the household. Every second household has a boring, and it's used without thinking, because we have this kind of a misunderstanding or I would say false belief that this water will not end anytime, but it ends, and it's going to be end. So how to use that water efficiently? For that, this mobile is now one of the greatest opportunity for all of us, for government, for civil society, for everybody, that how we can save water, why we need to save water, how to use this water wisely. So as mentioned, Aisha and Munawar Saab, to use water wisely, and for that, of course, we need a true kind of a sensitization, awareness, that this is the most of the important life dependency after air. So as we should not pollute our air and our climate, we should not also misuse the water. And unfortunately, we are doing that. If we look into the sanitation, as George mentioned in his presentation, that in Pakistan, still about 20% people don't have the access to the clean sanitation. And this is also linked with the use of the proper use of water and access to clean and safe sanitation. This is also kind of, unfortunately, there is a mindset in our here. Yes, we are paying for the electricity, we are paying for gas, we are paying for fuel, we are paying for everything, but we are not ready to pay for safe water, or we are not ready to save water for ourselves and for next generation. So for that, all of us, GSMA and WaterAid, Coca-Cola, everybody has to start the campaign as the government did for Clean and Green Pakistan, that let's save water. Let's have our habits improve to use the water properly, wisely. And also, of course, if I will keep on talking, we know that there are so much, but thank you very much for having given me the opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Zaira. Aisha, question to you. Can you tell us how your organization is maybe using technology to spread awareness about water conservation, clean water, safe drinking water practices?
I'm sorry to say that we are not using as much technology as we should be. However, I think that will change.
Okay. The question, did Aisha disconnected, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No problem.
Back, yeah. So I was saying that, presently the use of technology for our water filtration plants is not that great. But I think that's going to change very soon. We have about 50 water filtration plants across the country that we do provide safe drinking water to those communities for. Pani project is one of them. It's one of the most well-respected water projects. And we have a new system where we want to put our goals of replenishment to almost up to 176%. So whatever we take, we want to not just give back, but we want to give back over and beyond. And whenever Sab's point that, there's this false understanding that you can that groundwater is just unlimited, and that needs to absolutely change. So we're very conscious about that. We are also one of the only organizations and the only private sector companies that actually pays for water. So whatever we actually take, we pay the government. Most of our plants are in Punjab, and that is where the water tax is most applicable. So there's always, like I said in the beginning, policy framework is not uniform. Other perhaps companies may not pay as effectively as we do, but we take our commitment to the law very seriously and do that. But most importantly, I think when it comes to monitoring, we want to really expand our footprint in when it comes to water. So yes, we are a beverage company, and water is a very important part of our core ingredient. But at the same time, we really need to understand that for Pakistan, almost about 60% of diseases come from water being unsanitary. And that's a very high percentage. And I think when we talk about saving lives, perhaps obesity, diabetes do not take as many lives as, maternal mortality, infant mortality does. And that is directly linked to water sanitation. So happy to make a commitment here today that hopefully, inshallah, in the next few years, we should be looking at technology to monitor and give us data analytics on all of our water plants. I'm going to definitely look into that.
Perfect. Munawar Sab, your hand was up. Was there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just a small thing that regarding behavior change, we have exclusive programs, and then we also launch campaigns. There we use our social media, and we encourage youth to come up. We announce competitions sometimes just to raise the awareness levels among youth. And we also try to reach out to as many people as we could. So our Facebook or Instagram or YouTube channels are very active. And we try that most people can reach to us through the mobile phones as well, not only face-to-face meetings. And then during COVID time, we used this technology for remote monitoring as well. And that was very interesting experience when we were sitting in Islamabad or Karachi and Lahore and different offices. And then we were monitoring our work in Muzaffargarh, in Thatta, or in Bateen, or in other areas where people could, easily send us show us the work on the ground through the mobile apps, or not mobile app, but through online communication. So I think this was all that I just wanted to talk about, that this is how we use mobile phones in our work. Thank you.
So, thank you so much for that. I do have a whole lot more questions, but in the interest of time, I am going to hand back over to Zunaira. But I'm really glad for this really interesting conversation that we had today. we heard about different private sector initiatives, different development sector initiative, technology that is being implemented, and most importantly, we have examples of partnerships with the government, for example, the CDA, and these and the kind of outputs that Ma'am Tahira spoke about with community engagement as well. So a lot of food for thought, a lot of opportunities for startups as well, I believe, to get into this space with the technology and working with the guidance of people who've already, sort of hit some check boxes and started off practical implementation. So they're really excited about the possibilities and the commitments that could happen in future. And Zunaira, with that, over to you to take this on forward with our next discussion.
Hi, everyone. Here, I'm just going to take it from Zunaira. Thank you so much for your time, everyone, and especially Munawar Saab, Madam Tahira, and Aisha from Coke. We're just going to switch over to clean cooking now. We have with us Ibrahim Saeed from EcoFire and Aisha Malik. Companies which are trying to break the rhetoric that exists of clean cooking in Pakistan and cooking as a whole. So Pakistan is suffering highly and majorly from smog and hazardous air, as we can witness in the winter month, and majority of that is because of firewood burning. So I would like to hand it over to Ibrahim Saeed, who's going to just give us a brief overview of what his company does and what is some of the support that he can get from the government. So over to you, Ibrahim.
Thank you, sir. Let me share my screen.
I've put the presentation on, so if you just want to carry it.
All right, thank you. So let's start. Basically, I'm Ibrahim Saeed, and I'm here to I'm Muhammad Ibrahim Saeed, and I'm here to discuss clean cooking practices in Pakistan. And our product, EcoFire Smart Gasifier Stove, that aims to combat the adverse effects of climate change in Pakistan. So let's start. Basically, let's start with some statistics. And I think when I did some research, it turns out that 90% of the energy consumed in the domestic or household environment is for the cooking purposes. And it also turned out that more than 60% of the population live in the rural areas and still use primitive methods such as combustion of wood as a prime fuel for cooking energy. While in urban areas, most of the household use natural gas for cooking energy. So to sum up, we have highlighted some major problems faced by cooking in Pakistan. First one is unsafe and unhealthy cooking practices in urban households that are causing a lot of strain on natural gas resources. Second, government organizations are paying little to no attention to make cooking clean and affordable. Third, most of the people lack information towards adapting clean cooking practices. Fourth, limited funding opportunities are hindering companies to invest and innovate cooking methods in Pakistan. So keeping in mind the problems, we developed the product that is responsible for propagating safe cooking practices throughout the country. So let's start with some features of our device. There are basically four main features. First, it is powered by biomass fuel. Second, onboard electronic controls. Third, smartphone controls. And fourth, fuel estimation. So let's go into the detail. Our stove is basically fueled by renewable biomass pellets, which are made up of sawdust or straw left over from cornfields. Second, the stove features sophisticated electronic controls that makes igniting and running the stove as easy as pushing of a button. Other than onboard controls, our stove is basically provided with a state-of-the-art smartphone app that can be used to control the stove and provide data such as carbon emissions and fuel consumptions from the stove. Moreover, a smartphone app also has a very unique feature that provides estimate for the fuel required for a cooking session. Let's move on to some of the targeted points we targeted while developing the product. First one is affordability and safety. Second, real-time data extraction. Third, user friendliness. And fourth, environment friendliness. So let's get into the details. The final product is affordable and it costs around 30% less than the alternatives currently available. And it has very low running costs. We design the device in such a way that it is safe for both users and the environment. Second, the EcoFire stove provides real-time data related to carbon emissions and temperature, and it is very useful for environmental agencies, and also provides data related to fuel consumption. Third, the electronic and smart controls make the gasifier very easy to use. And the last one, that dependence on the renewable materials such as fuel helps in reducing the carbon footprint and makes the device very eco-friendly. So let's move on to the expectations from the stakeholders. In my opinion, there are three major stakeholders that can impact the safe and clean cooking techniques. First one is government, second, non-governmental organizations, third, banks and financial institutions. So the government may provide financial benefits such as tax breaks to the companies associated with the clean cooking practices. And I think the government should also revive the clean cooking initiative under the SRS program. Also moving towards NGOs, in my opinion, NGOs with highest presence in the rural areas should help the companies in delivering the product to the users in rural areas and urban areas as well. The NGO should also develop programs to encourage people to use clean technology for cooking. And in my opinion, the financial institutions must provide loans and investments to the business associated with clean cooking. And one most important point, I think, is that they should encourage businesses to invest in clean cooking by introducing carbon credit systems for the current companies. Moving on to the partnerships we are having currently right now. Currently, we are partnering with Universal Service Fund, Sonari Bank, and Witbit Limited. Now we are developing a framework to work in the Smart Village initiative by USF, facilitated by Gsma to identify 15 beneficiaries to help people in adapting our product. And moreover, we wish to collaborate with SR's Clean Cooking Initiative and Clean Cooking Alliance. So that's all about my product and my company. Thank you for your time, and your questions are welcome.
Thank you so much for your time, Ibrahim. A very interesting product that you're presented there. Before any further delay, I would like to hand it over to Aisha, who's representing Jan Pakistan and has immense experience working in the clean cooking sector in Pakistan. So over to you, Aisha.
Thank you so much, Arham. Hi, everyone. My name is Aisha, and I'm team lead sales at Janpa. We are a clean cooking company based in Lahore. So I'm super excited to be here today and to share our work with you. So let me introduce to you the problem which we are trying to solve. Meet the Razia Bibi who lives off-grid village in Kasur. Razia is cooking in an open fire and inhaling solid fuel fumes, and she's unaware of its many dangers. The problem of smoke inhalation is not limited to off-grid village around Kasur. 3 billion people cook over open fire across the globe. According to the World Health Organization, 4.3 million people, mostly women and children, perish from fatal respiratory illnesses each year. Burning solid fuel fume is not just a global health issue. There are other facets to the problem. For instant purchasing fuel and gathering fuel also a burden on low-income households. In Pakistan, a single household in an off-grid community can spend up to 45% of their household income on acquiring solid fuel, and those who are not buying these fuels can spend up to 12 hours of their weeks gathering such a fuel for cooking and heating. The environmental aspect of the issue is perhaps let's talk about. Pakistan is losing 47,000 hectares of forest cover every year. No, Ibrahim, I'm just slide one, yeah, please. So cooking over open fires has terrifying consequences, and millions quietly die in their homes because they are simply unaware of its danger. The good news is that clean cooking can solve this issue. Next, please. In July 2016, we started researching and importing best-selling clean cook stoves from across the globe with the hope to make an impact in Pakistan. The first was about the ideal situation. We were exploring world of zero emissions. As a result, tested a parabolic cook stove, which is a reflected dish on the right, and we also tested an evacuated tube stove with a glass cylinder that traps heat and act like a baking oven. The obvious positive to using solar cooked stoves included the elimination of fuel cost and carbon emissions. But the challenges of solar cooking, however, outnumbers the benefits. For example, what do people do at night or during inclement weather? Also, even when the sun is shining, the people have to stand and cook in the sun with sunglasses on. People in off-grid communities across Pakistan are not used to doing that. Next, please. Next, we experiment with the best-selling forward cook stove technologies. These technologies reduce fumes, generated more heat, cooking meals faster, and help save fire. But user also wished for wider stove tops and larger combustion chamber because concentrated heat emanating from narrow stove top makes roti and chapati challenge to cook. The greatest problem with importing technologies, however, was the prohibitively high cost of importing. Next, please. After importing and testing different prices of globally established technologies and gathering culinary data from 400 households across off-grid around the Kasur, we arrived at a prototype that had demand. Our flagship product is entirely fabricated in Pakistan. Unlike imported cook stove, it is extremely affordable and appropriate for local culinary behavior. After 51 iterations of the product, we arrive at the right product. Next, please. To make our solution cheaper, we offered the same stove in concrete that cost only $2 to make. We were selling the concrete stove for $5. Next, please. This is the DIY kit we developed for the low-income communities so that they could make the concrete stove for themselves. Next, please. This is what a finished concrete stove product looks like. Next, please. Moving forward, we realized that reaching out to off-grid communities is a difficult process and that we could make the most of it. So instead of focusing on clean cooking solution, we broadened our product offering to include solar electrification and mobile charging units. Next, please. Before we talk about the future and next step of Janpak, we must recall and appreciate how we could not develop a stove for the Pakistani market without the help of our friends who believe in us. In 2014, we won $20,000 at Rwanga Social Startup Competition. In 2016, we launched a successful crowdfunding campaign through UpEffect. And we also raised grant from Palladium, a UK aid-backed project. Laterly, the same year, we also won the Grand Challenges Canada Global Health Grant. Most of our precious collaborators and supporters are listed on this slide, but this is not an exhaustive list. Next, please. There are an estimated 10 million households in Pakistan that could use our technologies. Moving forward, we are especially looking to partner with NGOs and the provincial government to help identifying off-grid communities and mobilize individuals within those communities, especially women entrepreneurs. In the next 5 years, our goal is to distribute and sell 1.5 million units of our solution in partnership with a group of international funders and local implementers. We will share more details about the project once it materializes. And so next, please. In the end, we just want to recognize that our technological solution has to encompass all potential stakeholders and that the end product must reach the off-grid communities and customers through government, business, the non-profit sector, and directly through online sales. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Aisha and Ibrahim. Okay, sorry, there was a little echo at my side. Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Aisha and Ibrahim, for wonderful presentations. We'll move on to our next and last panel of today. For that panel, we'll be talking about the challenges of investing in sustainable tech. And for that panel, we have with us Ameem Shafiq, who is Director CERT. We also are joined by Danial Khalik, who's founder Team Up Ventures, Omar Yahya from SECP, and we also have Armina, who's a senior consultant at the World Bank. This panel will be moderated by Yamna Hassani. Yamna, over to you. Yamna, I can't hear you. Still can't. Can we remove the headphones, please? Maybe it's something with the, no, I can't hear you. Sorry about that, guys. Just a little technical issue. While Yamna fixes her audio, I'd like to welcome our panelists. Thank you so much for joining us to talk about this important topic.
So I think we have Yamna back.
Can you hear my voice? No?
Yamna, I don't think we can hear you.
Okay, let me.
All right, so just to get the discussion started while Yamna's trying to figure out her audio line, I think I would like to start off this discussion by addressing a question to Danial, who has joined us from Team Up Ventures. Danial, you worked in the tech space in the past, and you looked at different investments as well. What do you think are the two key pillars that investors look at when they're doing investments?
So actually, sorry, I can't hear you properly. Your voice is muffled, so you might need to uncover the mic or something.
Hi, is this better? Sorry if I've got.
I think we have Yamna back.
There we go.
You have me back. All right, thank God for that. Apologies, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm sorry, Mohammed, if I kind of cut you out, but let's start officially. Do I have the controls? Are we good to go?
Yes.
All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining in to our third panel. And this is very interesting. It's about opportunities and barriers in investing in sustainable tech. So thank you, Zanera. You introduced the participants. Let me introduce them officially once again. So we have Mr. Danial Khalik, who is the founder and he is a general partner at Team Up Ventures, which is a venture capitalist fund. His areas of expertise is in strategic management, in finance, in business management. And then we have Mr. Ameem Shafiq. Hello, sir. How are you? He is a consultant at the Asian Development Bank. We have Ms. Armina Malik, who is a consultant at World Bank, and her areas of interest are in energy and in utilities. We also have another gentleman who's joining us. Do we have all of? Yes, Mr. Omar Yahya. Mr. Omar, are you there?
Ji, I'm here.
Assalamu
Yeah.
alaikum. Welcome. He represents the SECB. He is the additional joint director. He's worked there for over 14 years, and his area of expertise is in helping companies become listed in the stock exchange. His areas of interest are also in market research, in capital, in market commodities, and he comes from the world of finance. We have really everyone with us. We have people from the development sector, from the government, the implementers, and the regulators. So I'm going to ask, we'll open the panel discussion, and I have one question which I would like all our panelists to answer. And this is about the investment landscape of in the sustainable tech industry. So my first question is, what is the potential of investment? And when you are investing, either from a venture capitalist angle or whether it is investment from the donor side, what exactly are you looking at? How are you assessing those companies? So can I have Mr. Daniel, sir? Would you like to start?
Sure, happy to start. Look, I think the potential for sustainable investing in Pakistan is huge. We're talking about a country which is going to be among the top countries affected by climate change. We're looking at a country which is primarily based on an agricultural-based economy. And so fundamentally, we will have issues with water resource, we will have issues with food scarcity, and so sustainable tech investing is necessary to solve all of those problems. My own background, I think one thing we missed in the introduction is actually in renewable power. So I have a view of everything which is somewhat skewed by a bias towards solar and wind. But fundamentally, it's something that can solve a lot of problems in Pakistan. So I think that answered one part of your question. I'm forgetting what the second part was.
So the second part was that since you do represent the venture capitalists, what are the key pillars or what are the areas or the aspects you look at in an organization when you're trying to invest in it? Especially we're looking at those startups and organizations that work in the green space or in the technology or the sustainable tech space.
So again, in terms of Pakistan and the region, we're typically quite far behind the rest of the world. And so what I would typically look at is where a founder has proved that an idea works somewhere else in the world. We're not a country where we need to reinvent the wheel or we need to create something out of nothing to be able to make an impact. If we just look at things that work in the US, in Australia, in frankly our neighbors or in Egypt, Turkey, there are so many different ideas which can be applicable to Pakistan, which those startup founders in those countries will never bring to this country, because fundamentally we are not we're not one of the most high-profile investment landscapes that there is. We should be, but at this point we're not just yet. And so what we see is there's a great opportunity to leapfrog a developmental sort of stage by emulating and transplanting ideas that have worked elsewhere. In addition to that, how we vet our investee companies, well, you need to look at a strong team. You need to have founders who are committed and resilient, both from a psychological perspective, as well as from a sort of a financial perspective, that they can bear the brunt of the challenges that they're going to face as they build their startups.
All right, thank you. And then may I ask Mr. Ameem Shafiq if you would want to answer this question. So 2 questions. One is about the potential and the landscape and whether, yes, companies are interested in investing in this sector. And then you're representing the Asian Development Bank as the donor. How would you assess a startup if they come and ask for grants or funding, especially companies that work in this space?
Hi, thank you very much, Yamna, and thank you everybody else for attending. Pleasure to meet you all. I think Daniel very rightfully mentioned quite a few of the key elements there, and he beautifully said a couple of things. I think just to add to his points, from a political perspective, what you're looking at are key themes and trends. The immediate needs, policies, and the political environment, right? So I know we do live in Pakistan, and then everything is an immediate need. so to speak. But then there are certain elements which are, the current government or the provincial government would really go after. So those are some of the key things that investing companies might need to consider and look into. In terms of the investment perspective, I don't think I could speak on behalf of ADB because that's not how they operate. But some things that I would personally look at from a government perspective are the track record of the company. You are talking about utilities and infrastructure projects which are high investment, and we do need a good success rate for them. So that is something that I would look at. I would look at the success of their existing businesses, like Daniel mentioned. Do they have existing setups abroad, or whether they have successful case studies which they can implement within Pakistan. We don't really need to invent the wheel here. And lastly, and more importantly, from both sides, we're looking at the ability to achieve financial closure. A lot of companies that come in do come up with proposals which are kind of desked because there is lack of capacity at both ends to understand and analyze the project proposal at hand.
All right, thank you, Mr. Amin. So you said, obviously, you work at a very different organization from Mr. Daniel. So you are more into giving grants. So how would you assess those organizations that are asking for grants?
I don't think I'm at the liberty of answering that question, unfortunately. So I could only speak through my own personal experience. Again, in terms of looking at grants from an investment perspective, I think where multilaterals come in, they're looking at both the policies that are in place, the agenda that is the current theme of the government, and also what kind of implementing agencies are on board. So that is the entire spectrum of something that they would look at. In terms of giving individual grants to companies, I'm not sure I'm at the liberty of.
Fair enough. Okay, fair enough. Thank you so much, Mr. Amin, who represents the Asian Development Bank. And let's go to Miss Ermina Malik from the World Bank, and let me ask her about what is the potential and scope of companies and investors. And in fact, again, since you also work with the donor side, what is the potential of green technology, green spaces, green tech in Pakistan?
Thank you, Yamna. Since I work in the power sector, I'm going to answer that questions with reference to power projects primarily. So there are 4 types of risk that are at the top of the list when projects are being assessed for financing. And typically these include resource risk, which basically means as the resource that you're building the power project or basing the power project on, is that available in the location of the project? So for instance, if it's a wind or a solar project, is there sufficient wind or solar resource in your selected project location? Then there is a technology risk. With renewable energy technologies, some are more nascent than others. Wind and solar are pretty established, but there are others like, say, tidal or wave or geothermal that are either completely untested in Pakistan or relatively new. Then there is off-taker risk, which basically means the risk, the liquidity of the entity that will buy the power from the project that's from the power project. And then finally, the policy risk. So like Amin mentioned, investments in infrastructure, such as power, operate in a policy environment, which is governed by the government of the time. And so the government decides what kind of policy it wants to basically implement during its tenure. And then the reality on the ground for projects, whether they are already in the implementation phase or planned for implementation, can change overnight if the policy changes. So as far as Pakistan is concerned, resource risk in Pakistan for wind and solar is very low. If the projects are located right, then we have some of the best solar and wind resources in the world. And so that is not an issue. Tech risk is very low as well, because wind and solar are both proven technologies now.
both grid-scale wind and solar plants have been around for a long time. We have both the technical and the HR resources now in the country to basically manage and implement these projects from end to end or from start to finish with very little input required from outside anymore. Off-taker risk is also low because of the way our security packages are designed. So the government enters into a contract with the power producer or rather provides a sovereign guarantee. And so as far as off-taker risk is concerned, these projects that run in IPP mode are basically risk-free. But what has been very challenging in our context is the policy risk. Now, in 2015 or around that time, Pakistan became $1 billion market for renewable energy investments. And at that time, we were one of only a handful of countries that were deploying RE at that scale. Suddenly, in 2017, the government placed a moratorium on renewable energy projects. At the time, there were almost 15 in the pipeline, and they were overnight put on hold because the sense at that time was that we're heading towards or are already in a capacity glut. And we don't have the infrastructure in place, the transmission infrastructure, the distribution infrastructure to absorb all this extra capacity. And so we should not deploy any more grid scale projects, especially not renewable projects, some of which did not have ready connections with the transmission network, etc. And so overnight, we went from one of the leading renewable energy markets to one of the smallest. So the situation again has changed or rather improved in the past 2 years. The new government is quite bullish on renewables. And we now have, for the first time, national renewable energy targets, which mandate 20% capacity from RE in our net generation or total generation by 2025, and then 30% by 2030. And so we would jump from, say, about 2,300, 2,400 megawatts to 20,000 megawatts over the next 10 years. So basically a 10% increase, 10 times increment in our current capacity to produce renewable electricity from non-hydro sources. And so this target is very, very ambitious, as you can see, but what it does is it creates policy space for new investments. And so currently, Pakistan is a very good market for energy investments. The financing sector understands the industry and the project financing for power projects very, very well. There's sufficient expertise, both on the financing side, as well as the project development and the implementation side. The only risk I can see at the moment is the transmission system not keeping up with the increasing investments in wind and solar, because most of our solar potential is located in Balochistan, and wind is primarily in Balochistan and Sindh. So to really leverage this resource, we would have to expand the transmission network, make new investments in transmission infrastructure, and extend the network to the areas where we have the best resources. And so the only risk is that perhaps the transmission infrastructure will not keep up with the demand from new renewable energy investments in Balochistan or Sindh. But otherwise, Pakistan is now and hopefully will continue to be an excellent market for wind and solar investments.
All right, wind and solar investment. We will talk about the potential further. Thank you, Ms. Irmina. And then let's also bring our fourth panelist on board, Mr. Umar Yahya, who works at the SCCP. And Mr. Umar, you worked with multiple companies that are working in this space. What is your assessment of these companies, and how would you, what is your assessment of these companies, and what really is the potential? Walaikum assalam, sir. Aapko awaaz aa rahi hai?
बिल्कुल अच्छा so basically हम लोग इधर SCCP में private equity or venture capital, we're looking at both of them right now. So okay. And yeah, especially the fund side of it now. So in terms of startup activities, particularly in the clean and the green space, there has been nothing in terms of government, sending us something, या जो government initiatives are, जो particularly, startup में वो भी green वाली side पे they're focusing on. I haven't gone through any of that. Na? Obviously, there are some government initiatives, but that is again for the whole startup place. उसमें in particular खाली green को ये लोग नहीं green space को नहीं ये लोग कर रहे target. इसके अंदर काफी चीजें हैं. जैसा Ministry of Industries की है, there is this national SME policy. उसके अंदर they're trying to build funds, venture capital funds for startup companies. 30 billion का कोई endowment fund है SMIDA का. इसके अंदर then there is this other Ministry of IT and Telecommunication. उनका एक fund वो लोग they're trying to develop a fund. Then again there is this Ministry of Science and Technology जिनका एहसास program आ रहा है. उसके अंदर they've got like 1 billion के 2 funds. So then again, Ministry of Finance, we recently, through their Capital Market Advisory Council, has recently announced that these DFIs should, pool in their resources, or they should raise money to invest with venture capital side. So in terms of government supporting the startup, तो वो तो पूरी venture capital को they're trying to, उसी को पूरे को push करी sector को. Lekin in terms of specifically the what do you call it, the green space, उसमें तो I haven't gone through anything जो कि आया हो. It's too nascent of a stage to engage in all of it, especially for Pakistan.
All right, thank you so much. And then there's the other part of the question that I'm asking from your perspective, from the SEC perspective. If you have come across companies that are trying to be listed on the stock exchange and work on green spaces, how are you assessing? What are your parameters and indicators?
To be very honest with you, recently there was this case we had, it was a real estate company. So they said they're building a green project, green building. A problem is that हम लोगों को तो उसकी समझ भी नहीं थी. I'll be very honest with you. आया था, we had no idea what all of this is. अब उसकी वो certifications होती हैं, and then there's a host of certifications जो आपको achieve करनी थी for you to be assessed as green. लेकिन उसमें अगर आ भी जाता है, I would treat them as at par with other companies जो आ रही हैं. there's nothing preferential that they got या कोई इस तरह की चीजें हैं. Probably agar if we get submissions from the industry ke iske andar they want to do something ke usko zyada promote kiya jaye, probably we'll do it. Abhi to there's nothing that I've gone through and ke usko kisi ko preferential treatment mili ho is cheez ke upar.
All right, as you said, this is in the nascent stage. So as we go along, I think we're all learning, and as we go along, our policies are changing as well. Or we will have to obviously further work.
Obviously, it has to drive. Obviously, see, thing is that ye sari cheezein they would drive when the industry develops, right? So if the industry develops, the startup industry picks up, and there's a there's a very vibrant venture capital industry which is set up. तो फिर तो उसके अंदर फिर then you go in the green space और आप फिर उसको भी करते हैं, you give them initiatives के tax breaks and you talk about all of that, right? अभी तो there's nothing over there ना, अभी तो venture capital space ही बड़ी low है. Whatever it is you guys are working on, वो सारी जो है it's outside the SECP's ambit. जितनी ये venture capital companies जो भी आप लोग जहाँ भी ये लोग आए हुए सारे mostly all of them they're working outside SECP's ambit. ये आके अपने personal finances raise करके they're investing in startup companies. जो proper fund management companies आई हुई हैं, they are only, I think there's 7 of them right now.
Okay,
and
so
they're the ones who've launched funds so far.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Omar. We're going to come back to SECP and the role of SECP in supporting companies further. But let's, you talked about the venture capitalists. So we have Mr. Danial here who represents a venture capitalist fund, and I want to ask him that what has been your experiences, and can you name any startups that are working in the space that you've given funds to? Are there any notable examples? Because Mr. Omar said, and generally the consensus is this is a very nascent stage. So what has your
I think it's one comment which I wanted to make based on the comments of the other panelists is, like, I think we need to be very clear on how we define clean tech, green tech, and draw a distinction between that and renewables. The reality is that renewables is not something which a venture capitalist can ever invest in, because renewables is heavy on capital expenditure. We're talking about significant amounts of infrastructure investment. So that is where the DFIs come in. That's where banks come in with project financing. That is where international institutional investors come in, pension funds and the like. So there's a distinction between a pension fund, which is looking for a long-term, consistent, low but predictable return, which is things like power projects where you get a very consistent flow over, let's say, 25 years of investment. And then you have venture capital, which is probably the second highest asset class in terms of risk. And so that is a very different space. And what we're investing in terms of clean tech and green tech is not solar power projects or renewable projects in that sense. What you're looking at is things which are making a green impact or making a clean impact. Now, in Pakistan, that cannot be something along the lines of, a solar panel manufacturer, because nobody in the world will ever match the low cost at which the Chinese are able to produce solar panels. So that can't be an area of focus. What we do need to look at is the agricultural space, the textile space in particular, as those are two of our largest economic sectors. Now, in that space, if you look at the amount of water that is used to irrigate the agricultural lands, or if you look at the amount of environmental impact from the dyes that are used in our textile processes, it's about managing, reducing, and making efficiencies there. So how you do that is effectively by emulating things which are happening in the rest of the world. So we're looking at a startup right now that is using artificial intelligence and machine learning to essentially create greater efficiencies in the harvesting process, in the planting process for agriculture. But then in addition to that, there are other startups globally, for example, that one of my favorite brands is invested in Ralph Lauren. They've invested in textile efficiency startups, which are using plastics to create breathable fabrics. So things which would typically be thrown away are now being reused in very useful ways. Those sort of things have a serious potential to make an impact in Pakistan and also to create a significant return for investors as well.
All right, thank you so much for sharing your side of the story from the venture capital side. And then let me involve and ask Mr. Amin first about his experiences. And you're a consultant, you've also worked with SERP, and I believe you're working very closely in the areas of public-private partnerships. So I want to ask you about what have been the successful models in this space regarding public-private partnerships and green technology and sustainable tech. Would you like to enlighten the audience?
So in terms of success stories, I know Ermina mentioned there's been a lot of investment within the renewable energy space. At least over the last 2 years, we've seen $300 million invested within three particular projects, which were PPP. But the issue still lies is that there's a lack of understanding overall completely of what would constitute a PPP and what constitutes a successful PPP. Pakistan's still at a very early age where we're still trying to understand and wrap our heads around how to best operate the model. The issue essentially within the PPP structure is there's a lack of comprehensive policy, legal and constitutional framework, and that's something which a lot of the PPP units are working on. Another issue that I've seen here come up a lot is the lack of analysis and capacity to assess investment proposals adequately. And that's at both ends, right? So that's within the PPP units where you have government employees working, and as well as the financial institutions, which don't fully yet understand how to get financial closure. And overall, there's just an inadequate enabling environment. What I mean by that is, I think someone mentioned earlier in one of the previous panels, there's too many layers of bureaucracy. There's misalignment of political interest, and then there's a lack of strategic long-term understanding of what constitutes PPP or their benefits. Add to that a layer of mistrust from the private sector, and then we have this entire concoction of inefficiency within that system. Now, take a step back. How do we make that successful? Is first and foremost have a comprehensive legal and constitutional framework to assess what would constitute a successful PPP project. And from there on, we'll have enough case studies to work around and build upon a lot of the key themes in infrastructure.
All right, thank you so much. And Ms. Ermina, if I could ask you the same question as well, and since you also work in the development sector as a consultant and you're involved and your expertise is working with public-private partnerships, what has your experience been? Are there any successful examples? Are there any roadblocks and barriers?
Before I answer that question, I just want to add to something that Danial mentioned earlier about the impact that energy startups rather can make in the energy sector in Pakistan. There is obviously potential to make a difference or to contribute because energy startups do exist in more developed markets. They haven't taken off in Pakistan, and there are many reasons for it. But I personally feel like one of the main or one of the missing links here is the lack of R&D at academic institutions or universities in Pakistan, because most energy startups are born within the R&D activity, or born from the R&D activities that are happening in universities abroad. And if you look at the founders of the startups are typically either postdocs at universities or professors that have been researching a particular technology and are now commercializing it. And so that sort of innovation ecosystem is missing here in Pakistan. That's one weakness or weak area. The other thing is that the buyer, the consumer of what the startups would produce, which is typically either software or hardware, would be the government sector, since most of power companies all along the value chain, most of them reside within the public sector. So the typical buyer would be a public sector entity, and they are extremely conservative, and I would say almost technology pessimistic. So they don't readily adopt new ways of doing things, and they're particularly not open to adopting technological tools. I had a personal experience with a company called Step Robotics that had created a platform to automate the net metering system in Pakistan. So, net metering is this system of compensation that you get from the government for producing solar power on your rooftop and selling it back to the grid. And so he made this company made a platform that would essentially automate the entire net metering application process, both for AEDB, the DISCOs, and then also for NEPRA, the regulator. And they brought the project to USAID. USAID vetted the system, agreed to finance it. So basically deploy it at these various government entities for free. And yet AEDB and NEPRA and the DISCOs refused to sort of take on this new tool or assimilate this new tool into their operational systems. So, then there's no fighting against a sort of a mindset like that, because it takes time to change the way that these organizations operate and to sort of allow them or give them time to adopt to a new way of doing things. Having said that, the issues with public-private partnerships, some Amin already discussed. The authority, the Public-Private Partnership Authority, had some foundational weaknesses as an institution that basically prevented it from performing the role that it was envisioned to perform. However, in this current government, the Planning Commission has made a concerted effort to reconstitute the Public-Private Partnership Authority. They passed an act, I believe last year or the year before that. And they've recently announced one or two, what should I say, one or two large infrastructure projects that are being implemented at this scale for the first time in Pakistan. So they are making an effort to revive PPP projects in Pakistan. The government is making that effort. And I do believe that going forward, you will see a lot of, good projects coming out of PPP mode. Ironically enough, most of what has already happened has been in the power sector. But I guess that's because, the understanding around power sector projects is probably best, both on the side of the public sector entities as well as the private sector. So there's more experience in this particular area than there is in others. But now you see the system opening up to railway projects and road. I believe they've already done one or two major PPP projects in the roads sector, and now there's the Karachi Circular Railway that's under development at the moment. And so you will see, a more diverse set of projects coming through in the PPP mode.
Thank you so much. And I've just been informed we're a bit of a time crunch as well. So I'm going to involve Mr. Omar Yahya before we conclude the session. But before we do that, Mr. Omar, you represent the SCCP and you talked about how the government needs to play. In fact, Ms. Irmina actually talked about how the government needs to play a more role. So I want to ask you, representing SCCP, that how are you playing that role, or how is SCCP supporting those companies that are working in this space and they want to upscale or they want better investment? What support is SCCP providing them?
If you're talking about the venture capital funding side of the projects and all, so SCCP right now, what we have done recently, we have basically what we would, there was a big problem with the FPR taxation issue. तो वो ये रहा था कि FPR में taxation में एक company का कोई venture capital form करती तो
Mr. Omar, sorry, can you please? Yes, we have some guests with us who do not speak
Okay,
Urdu.
all right, I get it. So basically what was happening recently was that the FPR, they were charging, because of the recent Finance Act, so a single venture capital fund would be charging around twice or thrice the tax limit. And so the tax initiative was actually, it was finished recently. This was just recent. And because of that, there was a big problem with the whole industry, the whole venture capital and private equity industry. And what happened was that a lot of funds, and a lot of NBFCs that had registered to become private equity and venture capital, so they had just refused to, just start with their projects. And so they all stopped their projects just recently. So what we did was we took up the matter with the FPR and the Ministry of Finance, and we're talking to them right now. And hopefully, we're very hopeful that very soon that, we'll come up with some sort of tax initiatives in the industry, which will, help open up the whole industry again. And, very hopeful on that side. That's one part of it, the initiative side, right? Then we have, then what we did was that people say that when there's a lot of paperwork involved. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of paperwork involved, because when you come to a regulator and you want to raise money from the public, then automatically you have to submit a lot of documents. So what we did was that, there was some cumbersome documentation which was not required, and people were filing them twice and thrice within the SCP departments and everything. So what we did was we streamlined them. We made them, we now the documentation requirement is very minimum. So it's not that, it's not, the process is not as cumbersome as it used to be. We have expedited the process. It used to take a longer period of time. Now the process for filing, it's online. It takes very less time. And, these were the basic problems that people were facing. Then there was this fear that if they come to SCCP, they probably, have to do a lot of other compliance work. Obviously, it's going to cost more. When you register as a fund, obviously, it would cost you more because you're going into a formal sector. So what we did was we just recently back in, I think it was 2019, we amended our regulations and we made a more enabling environment. So for the venture capital side and the private equity side, so when they do enter the sector, they will be, they won't have to do a lot of paperwork, and they won't have to go through all the compliance requirements. So we even did that just recently. There were many issues. We actually had a discussion with the whole industry. There were many other stakeholders. We had a whole discussion process and everything. The whole government process. We went through all of that, and then eventually, yeah.
So thank you, Mr. Omar. Let me just recap. So you talked about the taxation and you talked about the paperwork and that process. So we are also running out of time, as I believe. But this is a very interesting topic, and I feel like we haven't touched the surface yet. There's so much to talk about with public-private partnerships, the role of the government, the role of startups, venture capitalists, their expectations, and policy and regulation. So with the limited time that we have, I think we've kind of set the context and we're kind of realizing what the situation is. But I guess we need to do more panel discussions, each on a very detailed level, to get our broader understanding. It is a developing...
Sorry to cut you off. Just one last thing. I think you can just share my email address with the people. Once we're done with this, you can share my email address with everyone. And if anyone has any question, I'm available to them. Whenever they want, I'm available. My time is available for them. So that's not an issue.
Thank you so much.
Just share my email address with them. Yeah.
We will. Thank you, Mr. Amin, Mr. Danial, Ms. Ermina, and Mr. Omar. We have your details. We will share them with the audience. And if they have any questions, we will definitely direct them your way. So Zunaira, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Yamna. Lovely panel, very insightful. Thank you to all our panelists for sharing your insights and knowledge with our audience. Thank you to our audience who has been a part of this amazing workshop. Now moving towards the end, I would like to welcome Zuhair Khalil Saab. Zuhair Saab has been patiently listening to all the panels, and he's been here from the beginning. Zuhair Saab, I hope you're well.
I'm good, thank you.
For everyone listening in, Zuhair Saab is co-founder Team Up, and he's part of the NAC as well. Zuhair Saab, any last notes? Over to you now.
Thank you very much, Zunaira, and thank you to all the panelists for the excellent contributions they've made this afternoon. I think it's as very rightly said by Yamna, it's a very difficult and very convoluted topic that we've touched upon, and a couple more hours would not have gone amiss in trying to solve them. My own take on this, ladies and gentlemen, is that, and with sort of the many years of experience that I've had working both within and outside government, not just in Pakistan, but other countries in the world as well, is that in order for innovation to take place, you don't need the government at all. You just need innovation from the mindset. And more importantly, right now in Pakistan, I think was said by one of the panelists, we don't need to reinvent the wheel either. There is a lot of innovation which has happened in other parts of the world. I used to at one point work with the Gsma as head for mobile for development many years ago. And my experience there was that a lot of the stuff that we're talking about today has already happened. It's happened in Africa, it's happened in Latin America, in India, in East Asia, and in demographics and sort of the environments that very similar to ours. We're not even really looking at the developed Western economies that we're talking about. So all we need to really do at this stage as an entrepreneur, as a startup, is to look at some of those technologies and bring them back. There's no shame in it. And all we need to do is adapt them in a way that they will work locally. We were talking earlier about, for example, solar energy and also about clean cooking. One of the companies I had the pleasure of working with for many years is a company called M-Copa, set up by a couple of young guys out in Africa, in Kenya initially, and other parts as well. And it's essentially, unlike looking at huge solar panels for a public-private partnership, they manufactured a small solar panel which could be put outside the window literally and would run a clean stove. Now, again, as I said, that is not necessarily a huge public-private partnership need. It is something which is already innovated, it can be brought back into Pakistan, and it could create wonders for some of the clean cooking initiatives that we have been discussing this afternoon. Just one example, I could go on for many more hours, but I think it's essential to know that. Also, I think, to be honest, and with all due respect to the SECP, we don't need to reinvent the wheel as far as venture capital is concerned. It's out there. Everybody else is doing it. They're doing it in like a fraction of the time that it takes us to do it here in Pakistan. All we need to do is look out there, and there's everything available. We can do it very, very quickly. My winding up on this is that all of this will happen with technology. We are blessed to have a huge penetration in the country. Let's not look at the 100 million which do not have the mobile phone. Let's look at the 110 million who do have access to 3G, 4G internet on their mobile phones, which is more than 50% of the population. And also it is the adult population, and 98% of our households are connected through a mobile phone. So the technology on that basis is already very much available. I personally think that that's where we need to go with our entrepreneurs, with our innovators, our startups. Look at that opportunity and follow it very quickly. One other thing that I think is very essential, and there are some corporates in this session, and I'm sure there are others listening to us on Facebook and other social media. I would urge you to use your resources to disseminate the information as well. As very rightly pointed out by a few panelists, we're sometimes unable to communicate the urgency of saving water or electricity or making it cleaner and greener. And I think we should use the mobile platforms to share and disseminate that information to our own people, so that just like we did with COVID, and it worked like magic, to be honest. If you look at the last 2 years, we have one of the best COVID records around the world. We can do similar things with disseminating information and basically convincing people to listen to some of that stuff. That's the stuff I will leave you with thoughts for the rest of the afternoon. Thank you everybody again for participating. And we love to do this at the National Incubation Center, and we will hopefully continue to do that in the future, and look forward to meeting some of you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zuhair Saab. Very rightfully said, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We already have resources that we can use to build the ecosystem that we are all trying to do. What a way to close the workshop today. Thank you so much, Zuhair Saab, once again. I would like to thank the GSMA team. It was an honor to work with them to deliver this workshop. Thank you to all our panelists, our moderators, key speakers, and a huge thank you to our attendees who joined us for this insightful workshop today. We will bring you more such opportunities soon, and all the highlights and information regarding this event will be available on both NAC's social media platforms and GSMA's. Thank you everyone once again. I wish you a good day for the rest of the day that we have. And hopefully learnings from this session will help us take the ecosystem further. Thank you and take care. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you.